Chapter 13. Advanced Tactics School.
That assignment turned out to be more exciting than I thought it would be, Commander, Rear Admiral Stepik said.
Yes, sir, me too.
That was nicely handled. Your use of a remote control beam mount to give you options has gotten me thinking. We're going to be looking at them again to make sure we're not missing any opportunities they might present. Standard thinking has to be reassessed from time to time, and I think it may be past time there.
It sure proved handy for us, sir.
So I understand. By the way, your identification of the Assyrian has given the Commonwealth Foreign Minister a pretty big club to go after Tenerife with. The diplomats are pleased with us this month. And the combat medal looks nice on your uniform next to the science medal, Commander. I checked with records. You are the first person to ever receive both the combat medal and the science medal in their entire careers, much less within a single year.
Really, sir?
Really. Fleet personnel had to think about order of precedence just so they could tell you how to wear them both.
The CSF Combat Medal was awarded to officers who had commanded a ship in battle and survived.
No small thing in a space force, where any direct hit from an unblocked beam usually resulted in the loss of the ship with all hands. The CSF Science Medal was awarded for advancing the science of space warfare in such a way as to significantly increase CSF's effectiveness in carrying out its mission. Jan had received the Science Medal after the Jeanne d'Arc had destroyed the Brunswick Third Fleet at Valour 9 months prior by using Jan's hyperspace theories to position itself to advantage.
So I'm hoping ATS won't be an anticlimax for you after having done so well over the past year. You're what we call a wild talent, Commander. Your untrained instincts are usually better than most trained people can do after considered reflection. I'm hoping ATS will sharpen those abilities, not dull them.
I hope so too, sir. I'm looking forward to ATS, actually.
Good. After ATS, we're going to have to make you a senior tactical officer on a heavy warship. There's no path to heavy warship command that doesn't go through the STO position. I think I have just the berth coming up, but we can talk about that in a few months after you finish ATS.
Thank you, sir.
I think that's it for today, Commander. Unless you have any questions.
Just one, sir. I've been working on the outline for a book on tactics. Do you think that's presumptuous or premature?
Not at all, Commander. If you can get some of that wild talent down on paper, make it something we can use to develop some of those abilities in others, that would be tremendously helpful. That's one book I, for one, eagerly anticipate reading.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Advanced Tactics School, sometimes called TAC-2, was the make-or-break class for warship command in the Commonwealth Space Force. It separated the line officers from the staff officers with brutal disregard of its students' preferences. You either cut it, or you didn't. ATS was scored competitively, and it was cutthroat. Exercises were therefore always by simulation, to keep students from trying to spike each other's performance. As it was, Jan almost didn't make the cut out of ATS. The problems weren't scored by results, but rather by how well you followed the book on This Is How You Do Tactics. As near as Jan could tell, that book was 50 years old, and had nothing to do with the real tactical situations she had seen. She allowed as how her experience was limited, but even so. It was amazing CSF had gotten by if this was how it selected and trained its ship's captains. After the first 2 months of the course, Jan stopped trying to achieve successful results, and by rote followed the recommended tactical analysis process. Her scores went up, not down, for failures that were avoidable with innovative responses. The experience and frustration weren't wasted, though. She threw her energies into her own book, using the ineffectiveness of the course to spur her on. She put just enough energy into ATS to, barely, scrape by, and she made a mental note, were she ever in a position to do it, to gut ATS and start over.
Chapter 14. Senior Tactical Officer of the Heavy Cruiser CSS Niels Isaacson.
I must say I'm disappointed with your ATS class rank, Commander, Rear Admiral Stepik said.
I'm sorry, sir.
Oh, it's not you I'm disappointed in, Commander. I've been having misgivings about ATS for a while. We need to teach people how to think, not how to turn the crank or regurgitate dogma. When the most advanced class in tactics we have almost fails the most innovative tactician we've seen come along in a while, you know it's broken. Your ATS scores are wildly incongruent with someone who already wears the combat medal, and from such a mismatched engagement. Since reality is not amenable to amendment, That means the class has to change.
I'm glad to hear you say that, sir.
What else could I say? I'd like you to do me a favor, Commander. I'd like you to take a moment to write up your impressions of ATS. For my eyes only. Don't pull any punches, because it's not going any further than me. I want your frank assessment. When someone says that, it's often a trap, but not this time. I need a view from the inside, and I would appreciate yours.
Certainly, sir. I'd be happy to.
Good. On to happier things. I have that berth I mentioned to you, Commander. Senior Tactical Officer aboard a heavy cruiser, the CSS Niels Isaacson. She's just starting to work up, so you'll be involved in getting her all shipshape for deployment. Given that, this is a 2-year assignment. STO on a heavy cruiser is a lieutenant commander's berth, and you were promoted out of the zone a year ago, so a solid 2-year stint on a heavy is perfect right now, Rear Admiral Stepik said.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Oh, and you might run into a friend or two aboard, Commander.
The Gerald Anson class heavy cruisers of the CSF were named after the signers of the Charter of the Commonwealth of Free Planets.
They mounted 3 heavy beam weapons and had 3 crew cylinders to accommodate their complement of 1,200 officers and crew. The 3 crew cylinders were each the same size as one of the 6 crew cylinders on a Cleopatra-class battleship like Jeanne d'Arc. With both half the crew complement and half the square footage of a battleship, the crew spaces on the Niels Isaacson were the same size as those on the Jeanne d'Arc. As senior tactical officer, Jan would have a cabin on the bridge deck, along with the captain and first officer, as well as workspace for her tactical office staff. When she looked up the crew complement of the Niels Isaacson, Jan burst into a grin.
Well, Admiral Stepik said she might run into a friend or two aboard.
Lieutenant Commander Childers reporting as ordered, sir. Miss Childers, we meet again. Welcome aboard, Commander,
said Captain Richard Murdoch, commanding CSS Niels Isaacson.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Please, be seated. Tell me what you've been up to. Not that your reputation hasn't preceded you. Jan sat at the indicated chair in the captain's ready room and relaxed.
Bad chemistry with a captain could be very bad. Bad for one's career, in extreme cases, bad for the service. Not likely here.
Admiral Stepik was clearly looking out for her. The last time I saw you, you were boarding a quadcopter for the Quito elevator. Of course, that was what, almost 5 years ago now?
Yes, sir. I'll be 19 in 3 months. That will make 5 years since I took the exam, and since you swore me into the service.
And here we are. You must have some amazing stories to tell. I want to hear them all, Commander. Every single one. Criminy. Have you seen what they call a senior tactical officer these days? She don't look like she's old enough to plebe the academy.
Chief Petty Officer Rory Chin groused to no one in particular.
Ain't been around much, have you, Rory?
Chief Petty Officer Felipe Fukuda said.
They were in the goat locker, along with another couple dozen of the 60-plus chiefs and senior chiefs who would ultimately take berths aboard the Niels Isaacson.
What do you mean, Felipe? I've been around plenty.
Not enough to notice her decorations. Pretty ribbons, so what? Those 2 big medals are the Science Medal and the Combat Medal. Look close, cause you won't see anybody else got both of them. I done some checking around. Sally Matsushita says Childers is the real deal. She volunteered to wash dishes and clip stores on the Aquitaine when Sally was there, rather than ferry ride to OCS, and she worked her ass off. Then, she got the highest score ever recorded in TAC 1. Ever. She got the Science Medal for redoing the mathematics on hyperspace, and using it aboard the Jeanne d'Arc to blow 6 Brunswick ships to hell in Valor.
And she got the Combat Medal for punching out a Tenerife light cruiser with the Clermont and Parchman.
The Clermont's a sensor tender, for Christ's sake. No shit. Others were listening in now. Yeah, she suckered him right into the sights of a remote beamer she just happened to drag along. You know, just in case. Huh. Well, that's a good one. Betcha they were surprised. Yeah, you could say that. She's smart, and she's sneaky as hell. We couldn't hope for a better senior tech. But it gets even better. She took UCS. With that little thing? Yeah. And you know how they always let the graduating students challenge the sensei at the end? Sure. I mean, nobody ever beats him, though. Boy, you are out of touch. Childers suckered Nakamura, kicked him upside the head, and dropped his ass. 3-count hold, fair and square. Jesus.
There's some other stories floating around, too. Like there was a rapist running around University of Jablanca a couple years back. Been terrorizing the campus 2-3 years. Childers went there for the doctorate in mathematics, working on that hyperspace stuff.
End of her first semester, lo and behold, they find this guy lying dead on the sidewalk one morning. Ruptured kidney, busted jaw, crushed windpipe, temple smashed in, broken neck, the works. Looked like a couple big guys got on him with ball bats and took their time. Ran his DNA, and he was the rapist. That was about 4 months after Childers dropped Nakamura on his ass. Damn. Sounds like he picked the wrong victim. I'll say. And one more thing. Do you know Senior Chief Vipers? I mean, yeah, sure, everybody knows Max Viper. Well, he was the senior non-com on both the Aquitaine and the Jeanne d'Arc when Childers was on him. Says she's below decks through and through. They had a welcome aboard party for her on the Jeanne d'Arc, in the goat locker. She shows up in an unmarked ship suit, no medals or rank or nothing, and says, "Call me Jan." She's one of our people, Rory. Topside, she's got subordinates and superiors and all that shit, but below decks, she's got family.
They can promote her all they want, but she's one of us, and she always will be.
Commander, Lieutenant Commander Jan Childers. Lieutenant Commander, Commander Natalie Rodriguez. Murdoch said, introducing Jan to the incoming first officer of the Niels Isaacson. Pleased to meet you, Commander.
And you, ma'am.
The three of them had a long meeting discussing the sort of tactical options Murdoch wanted at his fingertips. These would be developed in full by Jan and her team as part of the TAC group's responsibilities aboard ship. Maneuvering plans, firing plans, navigation plans. In CSF tactical parlance, it was called building book, assembling a set of alternatives to be worked through and practiced in advance by the ship's crew. It was the first of what would be a long series of planning meetings. It got to be late in the afternoon when they finally broke. Should we adjourn to the officers' mess? Murdoch asked.
Can I beg off, sir? The chiefs have invited me to dinner with them in the chief's mess. Senior Chief Matsushita and I were on the Aquitaine together.
In the goat locker?
Yes, sir. I, sort of volunteered below decks on the Aquitaine on the way to OCS. And the way they look at it, once below decks, always below decks. It's become something of a tradition.
Well, I won't stand in the way of that. I don't want Senior Chief Matsushita mad at me. It'd be cold cuts and leftovers in the officers' mess for months. Jan laughed. Matsushita ran the entire galley operation on board the Niels Isaacson. Go ahead, Commander. Don't keep the Senior Chief waiting. Dismissed. At 1800 hours, dressed in a plain midnight blue ship suit, Jan knocked on the door of the Chief's mess. It was Senior Chief Matsushita who opened the door.
Come on in, ma'am. Hi, Sally. Long time no see. And call me Jan.
As the days went by, more junior officers were reporting aboard. Jan had 2 assistant TAC officers, lieutenants out of ATS, and 2 junior TAC officers, ensigns out of BTS, reporting to her. Jan had a long talk with Lieutenants Beverly Bhatia and Ivan O'Connell about ATS, and their approach to tactical problems. Their attitude to ATS was not unlike her own.
Ultimately, it's just something you have to do, ma'am. Some Navy training is helpful, and others, it seems, it's more checking the box to go to the next level. ATS was sort of checking the box, O'Connell said.
I think I'm with Ivan on that one, ma'am. Sort of disappointing, really,
Bhatia agreed.
Good. I was worried you were bought into the ATS model, because we're throwing it out and starting over, Jan said. Oh, good. Because here, we really will be scored on results, Bhatia said. Yeah, and we have a lot more vested interest in those results, ma'am. It's not a difference of whether you go line or not. It's the difference of whether you go home or not, O'Connell said. Jan's first full meeting of the tactical section also included Ensigns Clyde Disho and Jose Miller. The 5 sat around the conference table while Jan spelled out what they were about.
What we want to do is to take the actual encounters CSF ships have been in during the last 50 years or so, and decide with full hindsight and our new hyper capabilities what the proper tactical response should be now, and derive from them maybe 20 standard tactical responses. We won't have a set of navigation plans and a set of firing plans and a set of this plans and a set of that plans. We will have a set of tactical plans. We'll code them with a color followed by a number, like Blue 14. Navigation and weapons will both know what Blue 14 means. If there's some other information necessary, we will tag it on at the end. I want to build a book for the captain that will allow him to specify in a single sentence the proper response for any encounter of the last 50 years. It will save time, add clarity, and have departments working together rather than separately. So first is to dig through all the records for reasonable descriptions of all the conflicts. We'll start with the present and go back until we have 200. Then we'll sort them out into categories and start working on best responses. We all clear on what we'll be doing?
They were on their way to Serestic to join Vice Admiral Bjorn Pande's forces there. Jan was updating Captain Murdoch and Commander Rodriguez on their progress in building book for tactical. It didn't work out the way you hoped, Commander? Murdoch asked.
No, sir. I had hoped to have one set of tactical plans that would incorporate navigation plans, firing plans, and whatever else into a single order. When it came down to cases, there were just too many variables. There are a remarkable number of ways the outer colony navies have tried to attack us, and an even more remarkable number of situations those led to. To cover the space, I needed more degrees of freedom. Basically, it becomes an M times N problem instead of an M plus N problem. Is that right? Rodriguez asked.
Yes, ma'am. I had hoped enough of those combinations would not be useful. Enough would fall out, we could get rid of the need for 2 commands. But that didn't happen. The tactical situations varied too much. Okay, I get that. But are you making progress on the analysis? Murdoch asked. Yes, sir. We've actually completed the analysis, and have been drawing up navigation plans using our new capability to maneuver within the published system periphery. Some are really clever, and if well executed, will give the enemy fits.
I like the sound of that. As for execution, we're going to have to drill until it's second nature. We can do that,
Murdoch said. What about firing plans, Commander? Rodriguez asked. The standard set of firing plans is actually pretty good, ma'am. There's only so many ways to target and fire at the enemy, as opposed to the variety of maneuvers, and the guns haven't changed the way our maneuver capabilities have. Why don't you walk us through some of the navigation plans you've come up with, Commander? I really want to see those.
When they arrived in orbit around Serestic after 3 weeks in hyperspace, Murdoch reported in to Rear Admiral Betty Sintra aboard the CSS Guadalupe Rivera. The Niels Isaacson would be joining her short squadron of heavy cruisers, bringing it up to its authorized strength of 6.
Admiral Ponda has Admiral Sintra's squadron forward deployed on the approaches to Serestic. Each ship is independently cruising those approaches to see if we can't engage small raids further from the planet and its infrastructure. Against an attack in force, we have the rest of Ponda's forces in reserve in orbit around Serestic. Murdoch told Jan and Rodriguez once he was back aboard the Niels Isaacson. That's actually not a bad plan, sir, Rodriguez said.
Given our ability to use hyperspace within the envelope between the calculated system periphery and the published system periphery, I would think even more forward deploy forces would be in order. We could muster up enough forces to defeat any attacking force by hypering them to the scene within that envelope,
Jan said. I like that term, envelope, Rodriguez said. I do too. Let's call it the system envelope from here out. Nice, compact term. Anyway, orders are orders. Sintra is putting her ships on a 60-day rotation, with 50-day cruising followed by 10 days back in orbit for restocking and R&R on Serestic. That will keep 5 ships on the approaches at all times. Our arrival worked right into that schedule. The Guadalupe Rivera is on her way out today.
So we have 10 days to restock stores and rotate planet leave before we need to relieve the Sanya Meta.
The Niels Isaacson station was a pretty big chunk of space on the system periphery. In order to keep gravity in the crew quarters, the ship had to keep accelerating, so it was constantly moving about its patrol area. As long as they had to keep moving, Murdoch saw no reason why they shouldn't be drilling maneuvers. Niels Isaacson normally drilled every second or third day to give the crew some time out, but once in a while, Murdoch drilled them on successive days to keep everybody sharp.
Senior Chief Matsushida's crew kept the 0G nets handy in the galley. These were nets with 1/2-inch grid spacing that hooked on the edge of tables and workspaces. They were kept rolled up and hooked on one side of the galley work tables, so they could be quickly thrown over the workspace and hooked on the other side to keep things from flying about during 0G. Matsushida's crew got very good at deploying the nets. The nets also had to be laundered after every use to keep dirty nets from causing food poisoning, but they had plenty of nets to use while others were in the laundry.
The dining space was another issue. Normal in-space dishes and dining utensils were non-breakable, so the galley crew just closed the door and let them fly around and cleaned up afterward.
All across the ship, as in the galley, the crew adapted to the repeated drills. Their response to the general quarters alarm became second nature. As they drilled, the command crew was learning about the limits of what the ship could and could not do when maneuvering. The most important thing they learned was they could cruise in hyperspace even within the calculated system periphery, as long as they did not transition there. The gravitational gradient was higher than in normal space, but as long as they did not transition, they did not experience the dangerous shear forces. This formed another envelope around the hard system periphery, within which the ship could neither transition nor cruise in hyperspace. They called the transition or cruise portion the outer envelope, and the cruise-only portion the inner envelope.
The Niels Isaacson, like every new-built ship in the CSF since the lessons of the Jeanne d'Arc, was equipped with hull stress sensors at key points. During their maneuvering drills, the Niels Isaacson began cutting across the curvature of the calculated system periphery to cruise through the inner envelope recording stress readings. With these stress readings, Jan was able to develop a means of calculating the working boundary of the inner envelope from the positions and masses of the planets in the Cerestic system. She wrote a paper from that and sent it to the Tactical Division HQ back at Sigurdsson.
Having sharpened their skills and methods in their first rotation on patrol, Murdoch backed off on the drills in their subsequent rotations, but they still drilled often enough to stay sharp and to learn each new patrol area as they cycled through them. Jan was just getting up for the day watch when the general quarters alarm sounded. They were on their 9th rotation and were patrolling the out-system side from Cerestic above the ecliptic. She always knew of drills ahead of time. She assisted in scheduling them, and there was no drill scheduled for today.
She was on the bridge within 2 minutes, following Commander Rodriguez down the passageway. Captain Murdoch came in right behind her. Jan took the secondary tactical console and came up to speed while Lieutenant Bhatia made her report.
Status tactical, Murdoch said. A light cruiser and a destroyer made hypertransition on the system periphery at 345 Mark 030 on the sun. Distance 1835 light seconds. They powered up. The light cruiser is beginning to accelerate in system while the destroyer is staying put. They're not ours. Outer colony design. This is all by sensor relay, sir, so it's 30 minutes old, Bhatia said. Navigation plan Green 10. Call him out, Murdoch said. Green 10, sir. Sounding maneuvering warning. Sounding hyperspace warning. Shutting down normal space drive. Gravity abruptly went to 0G. Reconfiguring to hyperspace generator. Hyperspace generator online. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Powering up hyperspace generator. Hyperspace bubble dissipated. Shutting down hyperspace generator. Reconfiguring to hyperspace drive. Hyperspace drive initiated. Coming to 100% thrust. Gravity increased over a period of 3 seconds to 1.4 G.
Come to heading 350-015 on the sun. Coming to heading 350-015 on the sun. Steady on heading 350-015. Timer running.
I think they're going for Cerestic 4b, sir, Jan said. The second largest moon of the Cerestic system's 4th planet, a gas giant, was a hard rock moon with a large mining operation. Crippling Cerestic's mining operations would open the door to its competitors in the outer colonies. Passing into the inner envelope. Hypertransition not available. Shutting down hyperspace drive. Gravity abruptly went to 0G again. Flipping ship. Flipping ship complete. Resuming hyperspace drive at 100%. Gravity abruptly went to 1.4 G again. Steady on heading 350-015. Passing into the outer envelope. Hyperspace transition available. Timer expired. Shutting down hyperspace drive. Reconfiguring to hyperspace generator. Hyperspace generator online. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Modulating hyperspace bubble per modulation beta 3. Hyperspace bubble separated. Shutting down hyperspace generator per modulation beta 3. They had aimed at a spot 20 light seconds short of where their light cruiser should be, had she held her course. Instead, she had flipped and started to run for the system periphery. She had speed towards Cerestic 4b to burn off first, but she had better acceleration than Niels Isaacson. There she is, sir.
She's still in the outer envelope. Velocity starting to build toward the system periphery.
Navigation plan Red 2 to 6 light seconds. Power to shields forward. Firing plan Alpha, guns free. Fire at will.
Red 2, sir. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Powering up hyperspace generator. Hyperspace bubble dissipated. Shutting down hyperspace generator. Reconfiguring to hyperspace drive. Hyperspace drive initiated. Coming to 100% thrust. Come to heading 281 Mark 020. Coming to heading 281 Mark 020. Steady on heading 281 Mark 020. Timer running. Timer expired. Shutting down hyperspace drive. Reconfiguring to hyperspace generator. Hyperspace generator online. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Modulating hyperspace bubble per modulation beta 3. Hyperspace bubble separated. Shutting down hyperspace generator per modulation beta 3. Target acquired. Firing all guns.
Niels Isaacson emerged from hyperspace directly behind the light cruiser with overtake velocity and 6 light seconds away. Niels Isaacson's beam weapon range was 7 light seconds, while the light cruiser's was 5 light seconds. Niels Isaacson fired 2 salvos of all 3 beam weapons. Even with her aft shields at full power, the light cruiser was no match for the broadside of a heavy cruiser.
Target destroyed, sir. That destroyer is hypering out, sir. He may be going for help,
Jan said. Maintain hyperspace generator. Do not reconfigure for normal space drive, Murdoch said.
Hyperspace generator standing by, sir. Hyperspace transition at 0 Mark 0, 30 light seconds. I make it 3 heavy cruisers, sir,
Jan said. Navigation plan Red 8, 5 light seconds at 270 Mark 045 on the target. Maintain power to forward shields. Firing plan Beta. Guns free. Fire at will, Murdoch said.
Red 8, sir. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Powering up hyperspace generator. Hyperspace bubble dissipated. Shutting down hyperspace generator. Reconfiguring to hyperspace drive. Hyperspace drive initiated. Coming to 100% thrust.
Come to heading 015 Mark 015.
Coming to heading 015 Mark 015.
Steady on heading 015 Mark 015.
Timer running. Timer expired. Shutting down hyperspace drive.
Rotate ship port 105 down 060.
Rotating ship port 105 down 060. Reconfiguring to hyperspace generator. Hyperspace generator online. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Modulating hyperspace bubble per modulation beta 3. Hyperspace bubble separated. Shutting down hyperspace generator per modulation beta 3. Targets acquired. Firing all guns.
Niels Isaacson emerged from hyperspace above and to the port of the 3 heavy cruisers, at a distance of 5 light seconds and bows on. She fired 3 salvos, with her pre-aimed guns each trained on 1 opponent per firing plan Beta. When the enemy force had seen the Niels Isaacson hyper out, they had expected her to come in from behind them.
With all their shields and guns pointed aft, they stood no chance, and all were destroyed.
Targets destroyed, sir.
Tactical map that point where the destroyer disappeared, Murdoch said.
Got it, sir,
Jan said. Navigation plan Red 4 on that point. Power to all shields. Firing plan Alpha. Guns free. Fire at will.
Red 4 on the mark, sir. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Powering up hyperspace generator. Hyperspace bubble dissipated. Shutting down hyperspace generator. Reconfiguring to hyperspace drive. Hyperspace drive initiated. Coming to 100% thrust. Come to heading 350 Mark 0 on the sun. Coming to heading 350 Mark 0 on the sun. Steady on heading 350 Mark 0. Timer running. Timer expired. Shutting down hyperspace drive. Flipping ship. Flipping ship complete. Resuming hyperspace drive at 100%. Come to heading 010, mark 0 on the sun. Coming to heading 010, mark 0 on the sun. Steady on heading 010, mark 0. Shutting down hyperspace drive. Reconfiguring to hyperspace generator.
Hyperspace generator online. Hyperspace bubble forming. Entering hyperspace bubble. In hyperspace bubble. Modulating hyperspace bubble per modulation beta 3. Hyperspace bubble separated. Shutting down hyperspace generator per modulation beta 3. So now we wait and see if he pops back to see what happened. Firing plan alpha remains in effect. Guns free, Murdoch said. The Niels Isaacson had placed itself 3 light seconds out system from where the destroyer disappeared. If she came back in the same place, or within 3 light seconds of the same place, she would pop out of hyper right in front of them.
They didn't have long to wait. Hypertransition, 0 mark 0 at 4 light seconds. Target acquired, firing all guns. Target destroyed, sir.
Navigation plan green 0. Take us back to our operations area. Stand down from calling out.
Green 0, sir. Executing.
Murdoch looked over to where Jan had just returned tactical to Lieutenant Bhatia.
You know, I could really get used to this, Commander Childers.
It went really well, sir. Congratulations.
After 12 rotations through the patrol areas on the approaches to Serestic, the CSS Niels Isaacson made her triumphant way back to Sigurdsson. Captain Richard Murdoch received the CSF Combat Medal. Everyone aboard Niels Isaacson received the Victorious Action Ribbon. It was Jan's third, so she wore it with 2 silver stars. Jan received the Silver Cluster to the CSF Science Medal for her work on determining the inner and outer envelopes of the system periphery performed in Serestic, and a second Distinguished Service Medal for building the book for the Niels Isaacson and providing the tactical support for the battle. The first DSM had been for her work on board Jeanne d'Arc. She was promoted to commander.
That's a pretty impressive collection of chest art you've collected there, Commander Childers, Rear Admiral Stepik said.
Jan blushed. I seem to be at the right place at the right time a lot, sir. Indeed. Although in Serestic, you went to great lengths to get to the right place in time. The operational flexibility and ability to maneuver the Niels Isaacson showed in Serestic was superb, Commander. If we can roll this out to the whole Navy, it would mean a complete reevaluation of our defensive deployment strategies. Instead of holding most forces near the planet, we could forward deploy forces to the system perimeter where they can maneuver in hyper.
I think that would be a superior solution, sir.
So do I, which is why I think an assignment here at Sigurdsson would be our best use of you right now. We have all that data we collected on the Commonwealth planets after the Jeanne d'Arc affair 3 years back. I'd like you to work with the science people here and see if we can't map the inner envelope of all the Commonwealth planets using that data. Maybe we need to go and collect some more data to do it properly, but you can help determine that as well. What I want is a reliable map or set of calculations for the inner and outer envelope for every Commonwealth planet, one that we can program into every ship's computers. Jan bit her lip and stared into the distance as she considered it.
That should be possible, sir.
Good. The other thing I would like to do is formalize your book from Niels Isaacson and make it standard book. We've resisted enforcing a standard book because admirals and captains always want to build their own book. But we've looked at it, and we think the book you built for Niels Isaacson is so superior, we're ready to override those objections. If they also want their own maneuvers, in addition to the standard book, they're free to write those if they want. So, we were hoping we could make this a double assignment and have you work with some people here to generalize your book to other ship classes and fleet maneuvers as well. It probably means a couple of years here, but you're way ahead of the game, so it won't cost you in the long run.
Certainly, sir. I'd be happy to.
Excellent. Speaking of book, how is your book on tactics coming?
Very well, sir. I'm about half done. I should be able to complete it while I'm here at Sigurdsson.
While carrying out a double assignment? Well, I applaud your ambition, Commander. I tell you to get out and socialize more, but I'm too jealous of your time to want to give up any of it. Just make sure to take the time to sharpen the axe once in a while, whatever way you do that.
Oh, I'll be sure to do that, sir. My favorite recreation is Enshin, and there are plenty of people at Sigurdsson to spar with.
Enshin? Stepik stuttered. Well, there's no accounting for taste. Dismissed, Commander.
Chapter 15. Recovery. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to just say the first word that comes into your head, Jan. Ready? Sure, Pat, Jan said. Apple. Eat. Cat. Purr. Sun. Warm. Navy. Home. Ship. Space. Chair. Sit. Rape. Kill. Wind. Blow. Floor. Down. Parents. Dead. Door. Open. Sex. Rape. Foot. Toes. Children. Jan sat silent. She closed her eyes for several minutes, opened them again. A tear slid down her cheek.
Children, Jan?
Asked Pat Burnt, a counselor at Sigurdsson Fleet Base, Fleet Military Hospital. I don't get one word, Pat. Cute, I guess. Mostly I just get emotions, Jan said. Which emotions? Longing, hopelessness, envy, Jan said. Despair. That's quite a palette, Jan. Let's talk about them one at a time, shall we?
Commander Jan Childers was back on Jablanka at Sigurdsson Fleet Base after a 2-year deployment to Serestic aboard the CSS Niels Isaacson.
Now, 21 years old, after 7 years of nonstop activity in the CSF, she had the time and the resources on base to get help in her recovery from her horrific childhood. Orphaned at age 4, Jan spent 5 years in a government-run orphanage. Abused in the orphanage, at age 9 she escaped to the streets. She spent another 5 years on the streets. 5 years of scrounging in garbage, hiding in shadows, living in terror. 5 years of evading predators of all sorts, including rapists and pedophiles, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not. She was always studying toward the citizenship exam of the Commonwealth of Free Planets. She took the exam at her earliest opportunity on her 14th birthday and escaped the streets and Earth forever.
What she couldn't escape on her own were the memories of the past that haunted her, that sometimes woke her up from technicolor nightmares and left her shaking in a cold sweat in the dark of the night.
You've told me about your past on Earth, and those are some horrible memories to be sure. But back to the present. Are you afraid of being raped now? Not right here, right now, but generally speaking, of being raped here in Jablanka, or on ship? No. What would you do if someone tried? I killed him. That was past tense. Did you actually kill an attempted rapist? Yes. More than once. On Earth. Since. I don't want details. Let's come back to the present. What would you do now if someone tried to rape you? I would kill him.
Would you be able to? Oh yes, no question. So you aren't in danger of being raped now? No. Yet you continue to let rapists control you. I'm sorry? You said that you could not be raped now. You've made yourself, I guess one would say, a hard target. So the only power they still have over you is what you cede to them. And yet you continue to let them control you, control your actions, your hopes, even your dreams.
So at this point, I'm doing it to myself. I don't see anybody else who can, Jan. Like everybody else, you have to slay your own monsters. Your monsters are much larger than most people's, but it's still up to you. Have you ever had an intimate relationship? A sexual relationship? No, I don't think I can. And why do you think that? Well, I've tried viewing VR porn full immersion, and I can never get past the point where the guy touches me. My skin crawls and I have to turn it off. But that's sex without any feelings, without any intimacy, without any relationship. Both parties are willing, but it's a purely mechanical act between strangers. It has no context, no meaning. Most women don't like porn for that reason. It seems to be more of a guy thing. So, you don't think that means I can't have a relationship? Why would it? It's like saying you don't enjoy eating when you're not hungry, or having food forced on you for that matter. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy food in the proper context when you're hungry. Well, that makes sense, I guess. I never looked at it that way. Look, you've told me when you joined the CSF your social skills were basically non-existent. On this, you're just going to have to trust me. You don't need to force the issue, to be in a hurry to prove something. Just don't be afraid of it, or think that it's not possible for you. That's the sort of thing that's self-fulfilling.
Jan was at Sigurdsson to work out the actual system peripheries of Commonwealth planets using her hyperspace mathematics and the measured gravitational gradients, and to generalize the book of maneuvers she had built on the Niels Isaacson into a standard fleet book of maneuvers, including division and squadron maneuvers. In addition, she was writing her own book on tactics, begun in earnest when she was frustrated with the CSF Advanced Tactics School.
For recreation, Jan was sparring. Sigurdsson Fleet Base was huge, with the result that there were a lot of engine enthusiasts at Sigurdsson. One of her regular sparring partners was William Campbell, a 24-year-old lieutenant in the intelligence division. He had graduated high school early and entered the academy at age 16, so he already had 4 years in the service. They were pretty evenly matched. He had reach on her, but she was faster, which made it a lot of fun. She looked forward to their bouts. Early on, he had asked her out to dinner, but Jan had demurred, citing how busy she was with a double assignment and a book in progress. Which was true as far as it went, but the real reason went deeper. She didn't want to lead anybody on, and she didn't think she could offer intimacy. As her therapy progressed, however, and she and Bill regularly hung around cooling down after bouts, she began to regret her earlier refusal. They had a lot of fun sparring. They could talk about her work and his, or at least the unclassified part of his. He was smart, and he had a sense of humor she could appreciate. One day after a bout, she opened up to him a bit about her past. As she talked, it became easier, and the whole thing came spilling out. All of it, including things she had not told even her counselor. Well, I had heard something about your background through the grapevine, but mostly what you've done in the service. Couple of non-coms at the office are impressed I'm sparring with you. I think they half expect to find out one day I'm dead, sort of by accident. You know... Oops, was that too hard? Bill? Oh, gosh! Jan laughed. But nothing about this, other than that you were from Earth's slums and it was pretty awful. This is worse than awful. I don't even know what to call it. It's a nightmare. 10 years, it's amazing you survived. Yeah, it was bad. I sometimes still have nightmares and wake up shaking in the middle of the night. Well, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you want someone to talk to or someone to hold you, nothing more, you can always call me. That's sweet of you. Good to know. About 10 days later, Jan had another one of the nightmares, and it was a bad one. She lay there trying to calm down. On an impulse, she picked up her phone from the nightstand and punched a code. It took a while to answer and sounded groggy. Campbell. Bill, it's Jan. I need you. Be right there.
At the discreet knock on the door, Jan tossed on a robe and let him into her apartment. Bill was wearing a ship suit, the universal casual dress on base, and moccasins on bare feet. He hadn't taken time to do more than comb his hair with his hands on the way over. As he was about to speak, she put a shushing finger to his lips, took his hand, and led him to the bedroom. She stopped at the bed, leaned up, and whispered in his ear, "Just hold me." With that, she dropped the robe to the side and, wearing just her panties, climbed into the bed facing the wall.
Bill kicked off the moccasins and took off his ship suit and set it on a side chair. In his briefs, he climbed into the bed behind her and curled up to her back. Jan had woken in a cold sweat from the nightmare, and he was deliciously warm after his walk across the base. He had one arm under her neck, the elbow bent so he could hold her other shoulder, and one arm around her waist. As they lay that way, after a moment, he felt soft tears falling on his arm. Jan, is something wrong? Not trusting herself to speak, Jan shook her head. She took his hand from her shoulder kissed it, and put it back. They both slept like babies. It was 6 o'clock the next morning when they said goodbye at the apartment door.
Thank you.
No problem. What are friends for, anyway?
See you later.
They took their relationship slowly. Jan took it as fast as she thought she dared, and Bill was satisfied to let her set the pace. It was 2 months and many nights of cuddling before they made love for the first time. Jan stopped in to Pat Burnt's office a couple weeks later.
You were right. It's totally different within a caring relationship with the right person. It's just, I don't know, it's just different,
Jan said.